microphones on mute, and we can all say the pledge together. John, can't hear you.
I think before we do that, Warren, we need to call the roll and establish a quorum.
Well, yeah, we did that already. I don't mind doing it again, but protocol-wise, you think we should do it again?
I'm not comfortable. I'm not quite sure who I've got and who I don't have. So I'm going to call, without objection, I'll call the roll.
Yeah, you go ahead. Superintendent, call the roll.
Lauren Andrews.
Here.
Tom Pico.
Here.
Susan Thomas. Gerald Winan.
He's coming along.
Chelsea Everett.
Here.
Mark Lewis.
Here.
Lane Sturdivant. Doug Curtis Jr. Carol Backoffner.
Here.
Amy Williams Beers.
Here.
You have a quorum. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And John, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, public participation. Comments should be submitted through comments at rc13.org. So there aren't many, and they have been mostly sent to us through email already. And I will keep watching this tonight in case there's any questions during our discussion that I feel we should take. All right, so I'm going to bend the rules a little bit that if someone emails in with a huge question for us to consider, I'm going to pose it from them or maybe paraphrase what they say. Actually, adjustments to the agenda is right before that. That's number 6. And I am going to move the reports, which are number 11 on the agenda, to the new number 9. So we will do that before the business items. And the consent agenda, number 8, approval of minutes of the meetings of June 4, June 10, June 25th, July 16, and July 23, 2020. If there are no objections, the minutes will be approved as written. All right. Thank you. On to the new number 9, which is report of the superintendent. John.
Okay, thank you. So this evening, I'm going to bring forward the RSU 13 operations and opening plan for your approval. And I want to say that over the summer months, we've been working extremely hard on this. And when I say we, I mean administrators, teachers, members of the Seacoast Educators Association, healthcare professionals, people who have really dedicated a lot of time and effort into creating these plans. We've been in consultation with the Department of Education, the CDC. I've been in constant consultation with the Commissioner of Education and Deputy Commissioner, really long, twice a week in meetings, every single week, and with other area superintendents from the Mid-Coast area and regional superintendents, because I'm the president of the Mid-Coast Association, so I not only meet with them, I meet with superintendents from all over the state with the commissioner as well. I really also, I want to express special appreciation to teachers, and you know who you are, who took time out of your busy summer to pitch in and help in a strictly volunteer effort. I applaud you, and I absolutely appreciate and want to express my appreciation for what you've done to help make these plans a great one. I want to state for the record that we need to adopt the plans. However, whatever the board decides, we need to have the go-ahead to get on with the business of schools. We're going to do it safely. We're going to do it flexibly. These plans are designed so that if we need to flex in and out of a particular mode, we can do that. We need to go completely virtual when conditions worsen or things happen, we can do that. Right now, our designation is green. It's as green as we're going to get with the transmission rates in Knox County. But that being said, in an abundance of caution, we've also brought forward a hybrid plan so that 2 of our larger schools reduce their daily population of students through the building. And that we'll talk about that later on. There's definitely a rationale for that and a plan for that. I want to remind the board that we took several parent surveys and staff surveys, and it was pretty clear that the majority of our parents want their children to go back to school, and the majority of staff want to get back to work. We've done that multiple times. The last one at the boards, at the behest of the school board, who wanted to have even more parent input up front. We did that. I also want to thank the board of directors for their careful and thoughtful attention to our plans, for the questions that they've asked, for suggestions and things that they've shared. We can't do this without all of us, and all of us includes the board, the community, the students, the parents, the teachers, the support staff, literally everyone. It's an all hands effort, all hands on deck. So I'm very pleased with it. Is it what we're going to present tonight a perfect plan? Absolutely not. But is it a plan that I can stand behind? Yes, it is. And it's also one that's going to allow us to open schools safely and be adaptive and thoughtful. And I can guarantee you one thing: no matter how we open, we'll end up changing things. So we're gonna need to remember to allow for that flexibility during the school year. It's going to be a very challenging year. There's absolutely no question about that. And that concludes my report.
All right. Thank you, John. Report of the business manager.
So mine's very similar. We're really been working for the last 5 months on this reopening plan for the most part, trying to ensure that our infrastructure was ready for whatever direction the administration needed to go, whether it be fully in person or fully hybrid. There were a lot of things that we just need to be prepared for. We need to make sure that the buildings were safe, that our air quality was as safe as we would expect it to be, considering that we have systems in all our buildings that are for the most part less than 3 years old. For a district that didn't have any kind of air quality controls 4 years ago, we've come a long way with that. We are working on making sure that our infrastructure on the outside of the buildings is set up for the students to be outside as much as possible. We are working on making sure that our driveways are ready to accommodate both parent drop-off and bus drop-off at the same time, both pickup and in the mornings. We are making sure that our buses are safe. We're following all the national guidelines for bus safety. We are looking into every single option to make sure that both the drivers and students are safe on the buses. We believe we have a plan that will do that. We should be getting a little bit more guidance at the end of this week in case that changes, but we're ready for any changes. We have a limit of 22 passengers or 22 students per bus with 1 per seat, every other seat. We've installed barriers between our front seats of our vans to keep those drivers safe. The Building and Grounds Department has been working on making sure that the cleaning and disinfecting is set up And that strategies are being developed to allow them to be cleaning more during the day when students are there, the high touch areas. And Darcy is at work trying to make sure that she can accommodate both serving breakfast and lunch based on a variety of schedules in all of our buildings. So I think that, that kind of covers it. We're just really working on infrastructure.
All right, thank you. Time now for board report chair. So first of all, it is like so wonderful to see you all. I haven't seen you all in a place, even on a screen, like for a month. So it's just great to see you, principals and teachers and everybody else. It's just awesome to see us all together. I really think that our plan should be titled something like "Stay Safe, Stay Open," because if we do stay safe, we can stay open. And that is our plan, and that is our hope for the year. And as John said, things can change, and we will work with that. We'll take care of it. We are dealing with something obviously huge tonight, and but we may still have to deal with budget issues later on, end of the month or September. We just have to keep that in mind too, because the state has a $500 million budget gap, and I think the commissioner has been on record to say that schools won't take a hit, and I certainly just hope that's true. That would be great. To board members, to remind all of us that our lane is 30,000 feet. And while we have a plan tonight, we'll probably ask a lot of questions of, still in the end, our job is to do the best job we can to approve a plan at 30,000 feet, or the big principles of the plan, the big components, and how it all works together for our staff and kids. So in my profession, I'm always focusing on, and we're always trained to focus on safety first and psychotherapy next, second. And the same is true for our school district at any time, and certainly during this year, is that our focus should be always safety first for our staff and students, and then successful, engaged learning next. So just keep that in mind as we go through this decision-making process and we go through the months over the year until we hopefully get to a good vaccine or vaccines that really can hopefully change things, but safety first. As we all know, and we've seen in the emails to us and probably to you guys as principals and teachers, there is a full spectrum of ideas and opinions out there. And it's not just kind of ideas. These are very passionate human beings as parents, as students, as staff, whatever. And we just need to respect everybody's full passionate views as to what to do. Because on this side, we have people saying, just be virtual only. And on this side, get my kids in school every day or something like that. So all of those views are okay. They're all okay. And as we discuss this and make decisions together, all views are okay. All views are understandable. Everybody has concern, worry, or maybe some anxiety about what we're doing. And that's normal. It's because we should. We're supposed to feel that way. And I always talk about caring relationships, and that's how we get resilience and stay resilient to what we're dealing with. So across the street, there used to be a store called The Planet. And like years ago, I looked down across Main Street, and it's right next to Rock City Cafe. I'm on the second floor across the street. I looked over, and there's this t-shirt in the window. It says, "Keep calm, get the butter," right? Something like that. He's like seeing that a million times right now. So that's what we got to do tonight. And let's keep calm, pass a plan eventually. Let's just stay with that motto, that good main motto. Keep calm, get the butter, keep calm, pass a plan. And the last thing I want to say is that there's a procedural thing that we can do as a board, or anybody on the board can do, which is call the question. Call the question means we have to vote immediately, up or down, to have a vote on the motion. I personally, on this issue, do not encourage anyone to do that. But if someone chooses to, we all need to know that I just need to call a vote on that, and it's a majority. If a majority say yes, go to the motion and run it, then we have to do that. There's no discussion of a call the question, no discussion. We just vote it up or down. And if it votes yes, we have to go and vote on the motion. So that's it, what I have. And this is RSU 13, where we love our staff, we love our kids, and we are awesome together. Moving on to
Lauren,
yes.
Tom here, could I just ask a information question back to the public comment we've received? As that, I'm just imagining that some folks anyway emailed there assuming that that was going to somehow become a part of the record of our meeting, either being read or otherwise become part of the public record. How does that happen? Because I don't want people to feel like they haven't been heard.
Right. Well, all emails can certainly become part of our official record in terms of how people express their opinions. And asking questions at this point, it is a tough one. I mean, I'm gonna go to the page. And
I guess what I'm saying is that we have that email in part because we're not currently meeting in person and people can't come to the podium at our meeting in person to make comments. And so this kind of replaces that. But what is lost is the ability for the community to hear what people's feedback is. So we may or may not be able to address that tonight, but I feel like that's kind of the purpose of that email address. And I just want to make sure that people feel like they've had an opportunity to be heard, both to the board and to the community. So
it's a good question. I mean, we have several emails here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 or 7. They've been sent to us already as a board, and I could read them, but some of them are lengthy. So it's a really good question, Tom, and I could read them, but I don't know if that's what's the right thing to do right now. I mean,
do you feel confident that all of those have been shared with the board?
The last one at 5:28 from Gilead Munden may not have been shared.
Okay.
So
I'm not trying to put a wrench in the works here. I just think it's important that people have an opportunity to have their opinion heard. That's all.
John, what's your opinion on this?
I'm happy to read, once we get to that item on the agenda, I'm happy to read some of them into the record. There are some that are not really appropriate to read, mostly because of their length, but I think that I could probably take the points of the ones that we do have. They're about, I think, 5 or 6 right now, if that's what the board would like.
Gerald.
I think we just need to make them available to the public as per Tom's concern. For the legislature, it often happens that people will submit a letter to a committee and then they just read the letter out loud, but the committee members have the letter, they can just read themselves. So I think as long as we post them all online, we can always refer to them as a board and even quote from them. But I think if we post them, if we can actually do that now, and if we go further than tonight, I think then the public can actually get access to them and see what we're talking about.
I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure that people haven't sent email into a black hole that doesn't get, I want people to feel like they've been heard. That's all, regardless of what their opinion is. So.
Great. Well, I'd like to go that route, and Gerald, thanks for that suggestion. I am going to, as I said before earlier in the meeting, I'm going to follow this, and if someone pops in with a question, not like a long opinion, we're gonna make that part of the record. But if they pop in with a question, I'm gonna read the question if it's appropriate. If it's not appropriate, I won't. But anyway, I'm gonna read questions if they pop in, because I think that people should have that chance during this kind of discussion. Does that sound good to you, Tom?
Yes. Yes.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so number 10 now, business items. A, to ratify a memorandum of understanding between the Seacoast Educators Association of the RSU 13 and the RSU 13 Board of Directors. Is there a motion? Chelsea, second. Mark. All right. I think, John, at this point, we can't discuss this, right? We've done our discussion. We just, on this kind of item, we just up and down. So at this point, the superintendent will call the roll in this vote.
Lauren Andrews,
Yes.
Tom Pico,
Yes.
Susan Thomas, Gerald Winan,
I'll abstain.
Chelsea Everett,
Yes.
Mark Lewis,
Yes.
Lane Sturdivant,
Yes.
Doug Curtis Jr., Carol Backoffner,
Abstain.
Amy Williams Beers,
Abstain.
5 yeas and 3 abstentions. Motion carries.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, Lauren.
Yes, Carol.
Our weights are voted, our votes are weighted. So don't we need to take into consideration the weighted vote?
Yes,
Find
Yeah.
out.
An abstention is the lack of a vote. So all the other members present and voting voted yes.
Okay, thank you, John.
thank you, Carol. B of business items to acknowledge the appointment of. I'm going to read them all, and at the end, if someone can move them all to be moved in and voted. They are Peter Yance, Resource Room Teacher, Oceanside High School. Bud Perkins, North Star Program, Oceanside High School. Shannon Sevia, Special Ed Case Manager, Oceanside High School. Tracy Smith, School Nurse, Oceanside Middle School. Michaela Wright, Grade 2 Teacher, South School. Paula Weinstein, Pre-K ISP Teacher, South School. Aldrin, Grade 3 Teacher, Ash Point Community School. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay, and Chelsea seconded. And any discussion?
These are people who are leaving.
No, they are being
People who are
appointed.
coming.
Okay. Jobs of, yeah. And Chelsea, do you have a question? What's that? I'm sorry.
It's on the next item, sorry.
Okay. All right, seeing none, all those, well, great, everybody's joining our team. It's awesome. Welcome aboard to our RC13 team. And all those in favor, John, the superintendent will call the roll.
Lauren Andrews,
Yes.
Tom Pico,
Yes.
Susan Thomas, Gerald Winan,
Yes.
Kelsey Everett,
Yes.
Mark Lewis,
Yes.
Lane Sturdivant,
Yes.
Doug Curtis Jr., Carol Backoffner,
Yes.
Amy Williams Beers.
Yes.
Unanimous.
All right, thank you. Item C under business items, to accept the resignation of. It's always sad that people go, and we just thank you for your wonderful service to our kids and our community. They are Scott Browning, Student Support Coordinator, Oceanside High School, effective August 31st, 2020. Christina Morrow, Grade 5, Cushing Community School, effective August 31, 2020. Alex Faville, Social Studies Teacher, Oceanside High School, effective August 31, 2020. Is there a motion? Chelsea, and seconded by Mark. Any discussion? Chelsea.
I was just curious because these are coming so late in the year, if they're related to coronavirus. I assume they're not planned because they're so late. Can we just get some more info?
Again, I had trouble hearing that question, Chelsea. I'm sorry. It was garbled.
That's okay. I was just wondering why we're having 3 resignations so late in the year and whether it was related to concerns about COVID or other issues.
Can I just jump in quickly, John, and just say 2 folks were poached by MCST. So we're very happy for MCST, but we're very sad to lose 2 great staff. So 2 out of those 3 are moving on to jobs they really want to have at MCST. John?
Yeah, to my, none of this is COVID related to my knowledge.
All right. Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, the superintendent will call the roll.
Lauren Andrews,
Yes.
Tom Pico,
Yes.
Susan Thomas, Gerald Winan,
Yes.
Kelsey Everett,
Yes.
Mark Lewis,
Yes.
Lane Sturdivant,
Yes.
Doug Curtis Jr., Carol Backoffner,
Yes, with thanks and regret.
Amy Williams Beers.
Yes.
All right, so vote. Thank you. D, approval of RSU 13 school reopening and operation plan. We've seen that. John did description. Is there a motion? Chelsea and Mark seconded. All right, it is time for discussion. John, anything you want to add, or Stephanie, before we get into questions and things?
Lauren, I think we need a motion before we discuss anything.
Oh, sorry. Yep. Clerk, the superintendent will call the roll on that particular motion. Thank you. Got ahead of myself.
Lauren, I apologize, but right when you started talking, my computer started to freeze. I didn't hear a motion or a second.
Yeah. There was a motion. Yep.
Motion by Chelsea, second by Mark. And now, no, wait a minute. Wait a minute. We had the motion, we had the second, now we're having discussion. We don't need a vote. Yeah.
Right. No vote right now.
So, all right. So anyway, John, you have a question? I think, can you hear me, John? That's going to be a problem.
I'm having a lot of audio trouble right now.
Do you have a plan B device, or you're in your laptop?
I don't think it's the device.
Okay. Well, so we're going to ask questions now and discuss things. And John, if you can't hear and talk, great. Stephanie, you want to jump in? Great. Anyone else? Principals, jump in, and I'll get things going. All right, just to break the ice here. So Jesse Barkey and Terry Church, anyone from the high school. So obviously some of us board members, we're not just board members, we're parents, you know, so we're interested in how things will happen in the high school. I mean, we've talked about in the middle school. I want to hear about next is how exactly you see your plan working as we start, knowing things can change.
Well, I had a feeling such a question might come up. I do have a couple of slides. I don't know if you want me to walk you through.
Yeah, go ahead if you can. If you need permission to show screen.
Lauren, can,
Tom?
I'm sorry to interject again, but I think it's important for the public that may not know who all of the folks are on the screen for everybody to introduce themselves.
Fine, good, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Jesse Barkey, Principal, Oceanside High School.
Carrie Church, Assistant Principal, Oceanside High School.
Thank you guys.
So the plan we have proposed is one in which we will move to a hybrid model, similar to the middle school. And why we chose to move with a hybrid model, as we're taking a look at all these different options and the variables and the guidelines presented by the state, we came to quickly realize that really this was the best way that we could still provide a safe learning environment for all students while adhering to all safety and spacing guidelines. And this was really the only way that we could really maintain all of our important existing programming by also adhering to the guidelines as well. Having a full opening at the high school presented a number of logistical challenges for staff, for spacing, for course offerings. And we felt as though that this was the most effective way for us to be safe and still offer effective programming. So our schedule would be very similar to what our typical schedule would look like. We'd still have our
Jesse?
Yes.
Would you please explain how the white and blue days work prior to COVID, so that other people who aren't familiar with the high school understand how the length of classes and the number of classes and how that works?
Yep. Happy to do that. So typically we would have an alternating day schedule, blue-white schedule. So if today was a blue day, tomorrow would be a white day. And you would have a different set of classes each day. If you access program at Midcoast School of Technology, that would be all of one of your color days, where your class at the high school would be the other day. We would have 4 blocks per day. We would typically have our targeted learning, our support, intervention, enrichment block between blocks 1 and 2. Lunches would typically be during 3rd block. And students would go through and have about, works out to be a little bit more than 70 minutes per period for each of those blocks on a typical day.
And for people over 50, block is the same as class.
Correct.
Okay.
Period, block, yes.
I'm not over 50.
So to kind of make this work a little bit better for a hybrid model and kind of keeping the variables that we have in mind, we did make a couple shifts and adjustments to what the schedule looks like. We still have 4 blocks for periods. They're slightly shorter. And we added that extra time into our targeted learning, virtual learning support block, which we moved to the end of the day to provide a little bit more flexibility for students there. We have a beautiful new cafeteria that we're not going to be able to use for everybody to be able to eat lunch, just due to the setup and the spacing, and having to use that as a classroom space as well. So we plan on having, we're working on some logistics as far as lunch pickup and eating lunches throughout the school. And our targeted learning time will likely also be some type of working lunch. How our targeted learning typically works is we have a tagging system where teachers would have the flexibility to schedule students on a daily basis. So that could be a different group of kids depending upon what the need is. That may be remediation, that may be working on an enrichment project, that may be working on a special project, that may be working with their STEM Academy advisor, that may be checking in about some missing assignments or making up a test. It's kind of our Swiss Army knife period of the day. And it really allows us to provide individualized supports for a variety of different students. And this period of time is really important. It also allows for us to check in with students, provide some social emotional supports, and really just kind of run that full gamut of supports and services throughout the day. So we did lengthen that period of time by a little bit because we know that students are going to have fewer opportunities to be able to access that. And you'll see that a little bit more when I talk through what the rotation will look like. But since students will be spending part of their day virtually, they're not going to have as much of that flexible face-to-face time. So teachers are going to have the opportunity to meet with multiple groups of students during that time instead of just the one group that they typically would work with. So what we're looking to do for student grouping is to ensure that we can maintain adequate physical distancing. So we're essentially splitting the students into 2 pods. And for working purposes right now, we're calling Mariner and Compass. It could be group A, group B. But students will be split fairly evenly in half, working the best that we can to create some efficiencies with those groups too. So ensuring that we have academic peers and groups of students that receive similar supports are there at similar times to make sure that we can provide efficient programming. Students would attend their classes in person for 2 days, and then they would attend classes virtually for 2 days, and then they'd be back to attend in person 2 days. So if you were a Mariner student and your days to be in person were Monday, Tuesday, you would then be taking those same classes virtually Wednesday, Thursday, and then back in person for Friday and then the following Monday. And then we would continue the rotation from there. I have a visual for that too to help out.
Yes, this is why I asked about the blue and white days. So
Yep.
basically the blue and white day schedule follows the students into in school and at home.
Correct. Yeah, so this is an example of a perfect 4-week rotation with no snow days, holidays, long weekends, teacher workshops. We don't have many of these, but just for illustration purposes. So if I was a Compass student, the first week I would be in person Monday, Tuesday, Friday, and then I'd be virtual Wednesday, Thursday. My blue day classes are always my blue day classes, and my white day classes are always my white day classes. It's just a matter of which group is live that day to which group is going to be receiving in-person instruction versus virtual instruction.
Yeah, I really like the idea that you've separated them into pods, because for possibility of transmission, if all students are in the smallest pods as we can get them, And if transmission occurs, it stays within that pod. Again, like a Cushing first grade obviously is a pod, but the way you're doing these two pods in the high school, I think is a very smart way to go.
Thank you.
Can I jump in there?
Yes.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Carol, and then Chelsea.
I had one question. I got two questions. One is, it looks like the time between periods is 5 minutes.
Yes. As of right now.
Okay. So, okay. The other question I have has to do with teachers. And I see that this plan shows that we have great flexibility in terms of keeping students down to small numbers, but are our faculty not going to just be exposed to a stream of students throughout the day when they're in person? They're not going to have that every other. How is that going to work? Because prolonged exposure to possible carriers is a problem, and we seem to be taking care of that for students, but I don't see it being taken care of for faculty.
Faculty will see the same number of students as they typically would. That is correct. But with the other measures that we're taking, with cleaning measures and following the state recommendations, you know, we're working to provide as safe of an environment as we can.
Wow. Okay.
Chelsea?
Not a fan.
Chelsea, you have a question?
Yes. So I wanted some more clarity on this pod system. Could be so. Is this going to be the same group of students that's going through the entire day together? Or I guess my concern is that in a normal schedule, you have your English class and your history class, and you have different students in each class.
Yep.
And so are we splitting just the entire high school, or are we actually maintaining a set of, say, 15 to 20 students who's going throughout the day?
So we're not maintaining just the same group of 15 or 20 students throughout the day, because there could be a lot of differentiation between the types of classes and program that they take once they get up to the high school level. So really it's just within the building. So essentially, you know, by splitting that, we're splitting our English 11 Block 1 class into 2 separate classes. One's virtual, one's in person. But those groups can be different throughout the day. So I may be with a variety of different students throughout the day. So I won't be with just the same 15 or 20 students throughout my schedule.
So in other words,
Quick pause. Pete, can you work with Doug to get him in? He said he just put his head in. He said he can see us, but he's not audio connected, or Ian or someone to help Doug get connected. Thank you. Go ahead, Chelsea.
so we're looking at approximately 350 students intermingling as a pod. Would that be accurate to say? And then I have one other
It's
question.
fewer students than that. We have, as of beginning of this week, we had about 520 students registered at the high school. So we would have 260.
Okay.
But you also don't know how many students will opt to do remote learning totally, right?
Right, and we have some of those students who are going to be mid-coast students as well. So that's the
Right.
likely top end spread across the building.
But the mid-coast students would still be coming partially.
They would only be coming on one of the 2 days. So if it's a Compass student who goes to mid-coast, they'd only be coming either blue or white. They wouldn't be coming both days.
Okay.
So that would reduce it on one of the days.
Okay. My last question is, so we're shortening classes a little bit, and I'm wondering also with this hybrid model of doing part of it online and part of it in person, if we're going to be expecting to cover the same amount of academic material in the year?
I mean, our hope is to cover as much as we can. You know, this is all new territory, and you know, fortunately, we have a little bit of experience now we can build on. This isn't as brand new as it was in the spring, and we're going to be seeing kids in person. So we have some best practices that we can adapt. And you know, teachers are going to be working as hard as they can, and we're going to be providing as many supports to move as far through that curriculum as we can. But we don't have any expectations of watering things down. You know, we may have to reprioritize certain things just to make sure, but you know, we're we're going to continue to provide as quality of an education as possible for every single one of these students.
Lauren?
Yes, please tell me, because my screen.
Carol.
Carol, go ahead, Carol.
So do we have a plan? What happens if we have a teacher who contracts COVID, and what do we have fill-in people? Are we going to use subs?
I know that's part of the district plan, so I don't know if John or Stephanie want to speak to that.
I'll speak to the first part, and that is, so if a teacher comes, then we're going to have to consult with the CDC and the Department of Education to decide what steps to take there, whether we'd have to close the school down for a period of time or whatever. Once that was determined, then we'd go forward with whatever we needed to do with substitutes. But I would say it's probably pretty likely that if a staff member contracted COVID, that I would anticipate having to close down potentially a building for a period of time. And we're waiting, and I should have from the Department of Education, I think by the end of this week, a document that would be more universal for schools across the state rather than just a call to the CDC. So I've been told that's going to be forthcoming, and I expect it will be.
And follow up on that, we will have no idea who may be asymptomatic coming into our schools day one. We're not going to require any testing, at least on the part of our staff.
The guidance from the Department of Education does not require testing. It requires people to do a self-check on symptoms prior to either coming to work, while at work, or for students while home before they go to school.
That's the honor system, right?
If I can, Lauren.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm curious about the fact that students from the high school who attend, the Midcoast School of Technology will be interacting with a larger population of students. Mm-hmm. I guess my concern is that we're breaking people up into pods in order to limit the density in the high school, like the physical building of the high school. But I would assume that a benefit of breaking the high school up into pods would also be to isolate, which students sort of have interaction with each other. And the idea that the Midcoast School students would go to the Midcoast School of Technology, interact with Camden, Madomic students, and then come back and interact with, half of this high school body, their pod. It slightly concerns me. And I'm curious, maybe this gets into sort of the questions of what Camden Hills and Madomic are doing. And I honestly haven't had time to follow them as much, but do we know if the social distancing, and I guess this is less of a question and more of a concern that I have in general about the level of interaction that we're introducing by having students not just interact with their pod, but also go out and interact with other students at the Midcoast School of Technology and then come back and interact with their pod, and the potential for more transmission through that increased exposure to different student bodies. So that's not a question. I apologize. It's more of a comment, I guess.
It's fine, Lane. So Jesse, could you speak? We were talking the other day about MCST. They've got more physical distancing a capability, right? So
yeah, they have some more space. I'm meeting weekly with Bobby, the director from Midcoast, Linda from Madomic, and Sean from Camden, just to talk about these regional concerns and figure out the best way to manage those. Because I think everyone shares these same concerns, Lane, trying to figure out the best way. How do we navigate regional programming in a COVID world? So like with all these pieces, we're continuing to follow the guidance. We're referring to other schools and other districts to see what they're doing, and continue to talk through and have conversations to ensure that we are implementing and maintaining best practices.
I have a follow-up question, if if I could. First of all, I just want to say how much I appreciate how hard everybody is working on all of these plans. And there's a huge amount of thought that was put into this. And I can appreciate that as, you know, as a former educator and curriculum designer, that this is obviously a very complex plan. But I have the same concerns that Lane does in terms of, you know, the CDC, and there's the former head of epidemiology for New York City, and then former head of epidemiology for the state of Virginia, happens to live in Warren. And I, you know, was asking him what his thoughts were on all of this. And you know, and the CDC says that the most important thing is to stay socially distant together with the same group of people, and not be, you know, co-mingling and intermingling. So I am very concerned about that. And in response to what Lane said also, I have been following and reading what's going on with Camden and Rockport, and they have adopted a model that I posed a question about in terms of parents are asked to decide whether or not they want to have their kids stay at home all the time, or if they want to be in class and sort of commit to that. And the kids that are staying at home are working in pods and rotations around in neighborhood homes. And everybody in that community seems to feel heard because, you know, everybody's afraid, but everybody's afraid of different things. We've gotten emails. I've personally gotten emails from parents who are super afraid of not sending their kids to school because they're afraid that they're going to fall behind in their work. And I've received as many emails and actually visits to my home from parents who are scared to death to send their kids to school. And so I feel like the most important thing that we have to do is to serve the community in a way that reduces fear, because this is unprecedented. So that's a very long-winded way of asking the question. I'm not sure why we're taking such a completely different path from the Camden Rockport school system, when the Camden Rockport school system has figured out a way to keep kids together in their own pods and not be moving around in different groups of students. And that's my main concern, because this is a super spreader event. It's scientifically a super spreader event. And so, you know, one person infected can easily infect 20 people within the same room within an hour. And so, you know, we don't know what we don't know. And so in my mind, that we have to make sure that we address the fears of everyone. And it seems like keeping kids isolated together in learning groups is the answer to a whole bunch of different questions that have come up. And I apologize for that long-winded.
Oh, okay.
Lauren?
Thank you. Let me just say that, so you're talking about, one of the things you're talking about, Amy, is learning groups. So I don't know if Jesse, you want to approach that, or Stephanie or John, but anyone else, about whether or not some parents have talked to you about that, or
Look,
I can see how it would work, but I mean.
Let's follow up though. One very, very important difference is that when I was a college professor, I would have students who were live students and students who were remote in the same classroom. And it made the students who were remote feel a lot more engaged to have students there. And that's what Camden and Rockport is doing. And I posed that question and was told that that isn't an effective model, but I know for a fact it is an effective model because I've done it. And if anybody wants to move in that direction and they want help with that, I am most happy to take a week off from work and do everything I can to help make that happen.
All right. Thank you. Yes, Gerald.
To address the question about MCST, as you probably can understand, they have their own policies or their own plan about how to deal with it. The way that teaching usually works there is that there's a teaching component and a lab component. Yeah, Jesse, how many kids do we have going to MCST? About 40, 45?
At least on any given day. Yeah.
And as we know, they're going to be either in Group A or Group B or Mariner or Compass, however you want to call it. But something that's really important for us to understand is that we're talking about things that we have control over. but we don't have control over the rest of these kids' lives. My 3 kids work at Rustica, at Hannaford's, and McDonald's. And so it's just, we're all concerned about all this, and I get that, but there's so much more beyond for sort of the high school kids' lives than just going to school. And they're going to be exposed to who knows what outside of the school day.
I don't see that.
We really need to only be really kind of focused on safe practices in our schools. There's no community spread in Knox County. We have to be prepared for if it does happen. And in that end, if we do have a teacher or anybody that comes into a school positive, and we're going to have to shut the school down, as part of our plan is to move to all virtual learning. I mean, it is in the plan to do that. So we're covering all this.
I don't really understand how that's a response to my question. That's not a response to my question. And I would like a response to my question before another question is asked.
Well, I was responding to the first question about MCST.
Okay. So who would like to respond to Amy? Jesse, John? John, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Amy. Could you just repeat just the basics of your question? Because
Yeah.
I think I got it, but I'd just like to hear it one more time.
Sure. The main thing is that the recommendations from the leaders in epidemiology suggest that everybody stay socially distant together with their own groups. And as much as I appreciate the thought that went into the approach with the red team, or I'm sorry, the blue teams and the white teams. I'm sorry, I went back to cybersecurity there for a minute. It doesn't satisfy the concerns over the spread of this virus. The fact that it's a super spreader, and that the most important thing is to keep people isolated together as much as possible. And I know what Gerald is saying, but the school system doesn't necessarily have to participate in that spreading of the virus by moving kids around into different classes as much. So the question is, have we considered a model similar to the one that Camden and Rockport is using, where the teachers teach in the classroom and students who want to be remote or parents who want to have their kids be remote can remote into that classroom, and the teacher is teaching to both the students that are live and the students that are virtual. And my main interest in that model is that it keeps people socially distant together. And the way that they're making that work is that the kids that are staying home are forming neighborhood pods, and they're working together and they're rotating around in different homes. And so there isn't a big burden on just one parent to be supervising the kids to make sure that they're paying attention and learning when they're in the home environment. But it keeps them from interacting with a whole bunch of different people all day long, if that's the desire of the parent. My main concern is that what I'm hearing from all the parents is fear. Everybody's afraid, but everybody's afraid of different things. And the model of having face-to-face classes taught with a remote option into the same class reduces the fear for everyone.
So my response to that is that we've considered any number of things, and we've mostly considered the guidance coming from the Department of Education and the CDC and all the must-dos that we have to do to have school. And I have to admit that I don't know exactly what Camden's doing, and I hear what you're saying, but I think every school system has got to find its own way. I think that we're following every bit of guidance that we have received, and everything that our committees with very knowledgeable educators and health professionals and administrators have come up with. So why didn't we come up with a model exactly like Camden? Because we're not Camden.
I'm not asking why.
And we went through a different process. So, is it something that could be worth considering? Yes, it could be, but we didn't go there. And I think what we have come up with is fine. I think it's safe. I also think that we've built into our plan enough adaptability so that if we had to make changes, we could do that. Right now, Knox County is completely green. We'll never get a greener shade of green. But if conditions start to change, we'll adapt our model. If it means shutting down for a couple of weeks and then going fully virtual, we'll do that. If it means adapting our hybrid model, we'll do that. So I understand the concerns. I think we've tried to address that with developing options for virtual learning, and we'll continue to do that and refine that. And I don't discount anything that you've said. This is where we've come to, and this is what we're proposing.
Yeah, and just briefly, I want to follow up and say that I'm not discounting what you've come up with either, and I'm sure that it follows all the rules. And I don't mean to be critical of anybody or anybody's work. I'm just saying that, you know, there have been many times when I was on my job and I put a whole lot of effort into something, and then someone came along with a better idea, and then I had to scrap it. And I'm not saying that we're scrapping it. I'm just saying I'm not saying that I don't appreciate how much effort has been put into the current model, but I just feel like there's another model that's been presented that alleviates everyone's fear. And my main concern as a board member is to reduce as much fear within the community as possible. And if we can have a model where people can stay at home and feel good about that, or go send their kids to school and feel good about that, and we're not contributing to the spreading of this virus, I would prefer that.
Amy, this
Amy.
is Terry. I'm the assistant principal, and I just wanted to let you know that when it comes to these students, if a student is choosing to stay home, we're going to help them and support them in every way possible. And if families gather together and decide to do this kind of pod system, Jesse and I and the staff at RSU 13, we are going to jump on board and support that approach. But since we can't force that on parents at this stage, they need to come to that naturally and want to do that within their own communities. But we'll help them. We'll do whatever it takes. So please know that we've discussed it. And if we see that need, we'll fill that need.
And I'd also like to chime in, if you don't mind. I think there may have been some confusion around our plan because we stated that it is our goal to provide a remote option for all families. And I think that's on page 7. And it's right underneath where it states the high school plan. And our goal is to provide a remote option for all families K through 12. Perhaps that might be different from some schools' plans, because some schools' plans say they're providing it. And they're probably similarly along in their plans as we are with ours. I think we've met most of our goals that we've set so far. I've explained to the board that there's several factors that we need to iron out before we can really firm up that plan, such as what our staffing will look like, how parents respond to a survey, which we have a survey ready to send out to them tomorrow after this meeting. So once we have more of that information, we can make that plan much more clear. Amy, in response to your question, I don't think that the sort of having an AV system where you're broadcasting live instruction is a bad idea by any means. But what we felt is it's not an idea that we can apply across the board. It's not a simple solution. As we discussed that type of a plan, we didn't really feel that it was appropriate for our elementary school learners. We want to make sure that teachers are fully on board with our plan. So we really want them to help us to brainstorm and develop what these remote options will look like as well. So yes, it is definitely our goal to provide a remote option for families who are not comfortable sending their students back to in-person learning.
Thank you, Stephanie.
All right, I'm gonna thank you both. Thank you all. Tom, can I go ahead, Tom?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to dive further into the plan and the decision for hybrid at the high school level. As I don't think it'll come as any great surprise to you that there are those that would say that you know, we do not now, nor have we ever had community spread in Knox County, and we're in a situation where we have one active case in Knox County right now. And if we're not going to have full in-person classes now, when would we? It seems like, so I guess that would be, what conditions would exist that would make you think that we should bring everyone back? Because I think there are certainly a certain set of the population that feels like, if not now, when, right? So,
John.
Oh, I appreciate that question, Tom. It's a difficult one to answer. The real reason behind the hybrid model at the high school is numbers of students and the distancing requirements that the DOE and the CDC have imposed on us for 3-foot distance between students in classrooms, 6-foot distance between adults and students, and 6-foot distance between students when they're eating. And there really wasn't. We have to do that. If we open school for in-person instruction, we have to do that. It's not an option. And this was really the only way, or the best way that we found to do that, was to reduce the numbers of students in the high school and the middle school on any given day. We just couldn't make it work with everyone there fully in person and then adhere to the guidelines that we were given by the DOE. So that was our solution, and it was driven from necessity rather than our design. My only thought would be, when the DOE and the CDC say, okay, the crisis is over to the extent that we don't have to do that social distancing with the PPE and so on, then we could go full on in-person instruction in those buildings. But until that time, we've really got no way to do it. And I'll defer to the high school folks for any additional comments.
I'd like to, thank you. I'd like to jump in there. A couple of questions on our comments email that I want to get to. A few of them are popping up here. I want to get to a couple right now. The first, because it relates to the high school plan, is from Steve Betts from the local newspaper. He says, looking at example 4 week rotation, I see Compass Blue, for example, attend each day, but Jesse Barkey said students in pods such as Compass Blue would go 2 days in a row and then go home working remotely 2 days in a row. Could that please be explained?
Yes, so let me pull that back up. There you go. Let me share.
While he's getting to that, I want to let people know who are watching that if you ask questions and they seem appropriate to this discussion, which they undoubtedly are, I will get to them eventually, right? Just know that I will get to them eventually.
Lauren, are we going to have a cutoff time for this discussion?
I'm thinking about that.
I mean, I'm happy that we table this at some point and pick it up later. I mean, I'm not saying right now, but at 9 o'clock or 9:30.
Yep. We actually have a policy about that, but we're going to have a conversation at some time if we need to.
So the color days are the groups of classes, and the Compass and the Mariner are the groups of students. So blue schedule is the same, whether or not it's Compass or Mariner. It's just a difference of which group of students will be there on that day.
Jesse, if I can interrupt here for a second, and I think this is where Steve's confusion is coming in. Steve, these are 4 different weeks.
Yes.
So the first row is week 1, second row is week 2. It's not all this is happening on Monday.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I got really confused by this myself.
No, thank you.
4 weeks? Okay, I didn't realize that either.
So this is week 1, that's week 2, that's week 3, week 4. So 4-week rotation. Yeah. No, thank you for that, Gerald.
Thank you.
Another question from the public is, in talks with other parents, there was some confusion in the interpretation of the reopening plan. A few parents thought all schools in RSU 13 were returning full-time, and that the hybrid model was only if Knox County was in the yellow. So John, I think you have addressed this, but I don't know if you want to add anything else to that question from the public. Go ahead, John.
Right, again, the simple answer is we received a list of must-dos from the Department of Education in concert with the CDC. And those must-dos included social distancing with at least 3 feet apart from students in the classroom setting wearing face coverings or face masks, and 6 feet apart while eating. And with the number of students in the high school, the number of students that would be in classes, it was really impossible to do that and still follow the guidelines from the DOE. And that's what drove us.
So
Even though, we have a green, and as Tom pointed out, it's as green as it's really ever going to get. But we still have to follow those guidelines from the DOE.
Right. So what you're saying in response to a lot of questions here is that, yeah, we're in the green, but we don't have enough physical space in the 2 buildings of the high school and middle school to follow the social distancing guidelines that we must follow from the state. So we have to split it up.
At the K-5 schools, we can have them come and maintain that distancing.
And we can, right. So that is the difference as far as I know. I think Tom Hansen.
Yeah. So just to close out my question there, given the current CDC and Maine DOE guidelines, if they remain as they are, there is never a time when Oceanside High School and Oceanside Middle School could go back to full in-person unless those change. Is that true?
I would say it is, Tom, because if we've got to follow those same guidelines, unless we added space to our building and possibly more staff, I don't see how we could.
Carol.
Yeah, I have a question, and this is probably a question for John. And that is, if you said that the guidelines are 3 feet apart, except when they're eating 6 feet apart. And if they're having to eat in their classrooms rather than in the cafeteria, how will they change from the 3 feet to the 6 feet if we don't have that much space? I don't know if that's a clear question, but I think you know what I mean.
This is Terry Church again. We're going to use the classrooms as part of that, but we'll have more areas to space. So that's just a reference to the fact that we don't want to use the classrooms for lunches, but now we're going to. So kids will be spaced throughout the building in different areas to maintain that 6 feet.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you. Jesse, you want to go back to your presentation then? Is there more you need to cover?
Sure. There's a couple more things. I know we've touched upon a couple of them, but so just give me a second to pull it back up.
Okay.
So just to kind of build on that, we've created a sample student schedule on what it would look like for those 4 blocks, just so folks can get a better idea of what that rotation would look like. But I think we've covered this and have an idea of what this would look like. And this particular student is a student who does receive special services too, because that is a population that we are concerned with making sure that we can provide all the services that we need for them. So we've played with a couple sample schedules. So this is just an example of that. And this student here would be an Encompass pod. So in that first schedule, they would be there 3 days for that first week. And then just the last point is about teacher schedule. Teachers are still going to maintain their current teaching load, but the big difference is they're going to have to be teaching in 2 different modes for each class each day. They're going to have to be providing both a virtual and an in-person component for their classes. So we're working with teachers and working on schedules to ensure that we provide adequate time for them to do so, to make sure that we're providing effective quality education for the in-person and the virtual piece each day.
All right, thank you.
That's the overview.
We're going to go in a linear fashion. So after we're done asking questions about the high school, then we'll move on to the middle school, then move on to the elementary school. So any more questions then, Gerald, for the high school? Go ahead, Gerald.
I have a couple of things. Heather Nelson sent us a really nice letter about her son. And her idea was that many of those students who are getting special assistance and needs are there 5 days a week, and that consistency is really important.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to try to bring those kids into the high school and middle school 5 days a week as opposed to 2, or I don't even know if they're even on the blue-white schedule? Is there a plan for that?
So if we're talking about self-contained programs, our goal is we're having conversations about them, and if it's appropriate for those students and they need that 5 days a week and they need that, we're working on developing a plan where they'll get what they need. Just like with any other student, if we find that they need a little bit more than what we're able to give to them right now, just like any other year, we're going to get together and we're going to talk about what can we do to provide that.
Okay.
I'd like to offer,
sorry, go ahead.
I'd like to offer some clarification as well, just in terms of programming. So special education is working to adapt to the different schedules presented by schools as they vary across the district. So as Jesse had indicated, we're looking to ensure that we're matching the intent of student IEPs, and that might look different for different students. So while we're trying to devise, a general model by program, we're also looking at individual student needs. And so, I appreciate you sharing that information, but we can't say a blanket model. Yes, we're having everyone come 5 days a week, but we're definitely keeping all options on the table to ensure we're programming appropriately for kids.
Okay, I mean, there's a serious hardship for parents that have to have their kids at home because it's hard enough to find daycare in general, but to find daycare for a special needs child is near impossible.
All right,
I have one more. Oh, sorry.
Okay, yeah, Doug, you're next, but go ahead, Joe.
I have one more question.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Joe.
Sorry. And this touches on what Jesse just said about the teachers at the high school, which is your bailiwick, are going to be teaching in 2 separate modes. You're going to be in classroom and then virtual. And I assume that means every day. And I'm curious as if are we getting assistance for them, because this is, adding a considerable amount of workload to their workday, having to deal with the students that are in but having to teach the students that are in the classroom, as well as doing extra stuff for the students that are virtual. Are we, and this is probably more a question for John, are we looking at hiring extra staff to be virtual assistants, basically?
I think it's pretty clear that once we get into this, we'll know what we're going to have to do in order to make it successful. But I think it's pretty early to say that we're in a blanket way just going to do that. The CRF funds does allow for extra staffing to address COVID-related needs. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility, but I think it's a little early to say we're just going to do that per se for the high school, middle school, or even the elementary school.
All right.
Lauren, can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
Okay. I'm confused as to what this looks like for the teachers as well. So they're going to teach 2 days a week to in-person students.
No, they're teaching every day to in-person at the high school.
Okay, so how can they teach every day in person and have classes that they're expected to be teaching remotely?
So they'll be providing remote instruction, but it won't be synchronous learning online. It won't be meeting with groups of kids and doing Zoom meetings as they're home, unless it's during that targeted learning time at the end of the day.
So essentially they'll be given assignments to do during those 2 days. They will not have instruction on those days.
Or we'll be implementing some flip classroom practices. There's a variety of different strategies. I've been meeting with different departments, coming up with some ideas of furthering the instruction and supporting students during that time.
So when I look at the schedule, for example, the one you put up, it looked like that student was only going to see a teacher in person for algebra twice in a month.
No.
that schedule that you had up on the screen before?
Every student is going to see every teacher that they have, as long as they have reasonable attendance at least once a week.
So maybe 4 times a month, they would have instruction for a subject.
4 to 5 times, plus that targeted learning time too, or if they needed some extra support, they would have that. Yeah.
And it's not your expectation that we won't, that they're not going to lose, education that way? You're going to maintain pacing?
Teachers feel like they've developed some good strategies, and where our goal is to maintain pacing the best that we can with this situation. But this is still a work in progress, and we're still figuring out all the details of this, but teachers feel okay about this based on my conversation so far.
And I'll chime in here.
Just want to make sure we do get clarification on the expectation for teachers to be providing both in-person and remote instruction at the same time. So thanks.
And I just want to clarify too here, because when we talk about a student only getting instruction in the subject area 5 times a month or even 4 times a month, obviously being the director of instruction, that makes the hairs on my arm stand up. But I'm also being really open-minded, and I think our teachers will as well, and I know our families will certainly need to, that we need to rethink what this model looks like. We can't just think that they're only getting instruction when they're in person. And I'm chiming in to support what Jesse's saying in terms of a flipped classroom model, and other avenues in which students can receive instruction that doesn't always have to come directly from just being in the building and in person.
All right, so I'm going to be fair here, and Doug, you had your hand up next, and I see you, Carol, but Doug was next.
Thank you very much, Lauren. Just a couple of things. Jesse, about your model, I apologize to everyone for coming in late to this meeting.
Can't hear you, Doug. Something happened.
You went on mute, Doug.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm on my phone, so my computer does not have audio, so I apologize for that.
Okay.
Jesse, real quick, I think you covered it briefly, but I'm not sure. Obviously, they're only going to school until approximately lunchtime, and we have the rest of the day, another couple hours in the school day normally that they would be going to school. Why would we not want to have kids go to school and use all that time if they're only going to be there 2 days a week?
Well, they are using that time, Doug. We've taken just a little time from each of the classes and added it to that targeted learning time, because we do use it for a lot of different things, and the students aren't going to be having that time as often either. So by providing a little bit more time, we're allowing more touch points from those teachers to see more students during that time, where typically you would only get to have like 1 group of students during that time, where now teachers could see 2, maybe 3 groups of students during that time, since they're not gonna have it as often.
So just to be clear, they're going to stay in school till 2:30 or whatever time they get out?
That's what time buses pick them up. That's the end of the school day. We're not shortening it.
Okay. That's great. And just a point of clarification, Lauren, you said that you're going to be going through some, you're going to talk about the middle school and the elementary school as well after this?
Yeah.
I want to be clear on that.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll wait for those questions.
Oh, are juniors and
I'm sorry.
seniors being dismissed?
I mean, we still have a privilege structure where that can happen. We're still developing on what that looks like in this current model. So it's a possibility, but we're not going to be opening the doors and telling every junior and senior to get out.
And if they were dismissed, they can leave at noon, you're saying?
If they were in good standing and didn't have anything, that's a possibility. But there's lots of ifs and scenarios that go along with that.
Okay, thanks.
Carol.
Yeah, I want to dovetail on what Wendy's question was about virtual and in-person teaching requirement for teachers. I'm really growing more and more concerned about the load on teachers and what's being asked of them. And this question Wendy posed lends me to go back to what Amy said about having virtual learning happening while the teacher is in-person teaching. It seems to me that instead of putting out assignments for students who are virtual and having them log in and find them later in the day, that why not have synchronous learning for those who are at home? It seems like it would be lessening the teacher's burden and making those at-home students feel like they are there with their peers, which is super important at the high school. So I think we should consider altering the plan, and particularly, I think it's just going to be a nightmare for teachers, and we'll wear them down where we don't want to wear them down.
Just so you know, putting cameras in the classroom is not supported by the SEA unless teachers want it in their classrooms. There's a lot of things to think about when we start talking about cameras in the classroom. So we have decided that we would only support cameras in the classroom for teachers who want cameras in their classrooms. So.
And maybe they will want that once they see the load.
Absolutely, yeah.
Chelsea, then Gerald. Chelsea.
I have two different questions going in different directions, so I'll just say them both and then people can answer them. I'd still like a little bit more clarity on what we're doing with special education. And I wonder if one reason why, I wonder how much at this point parents know and how much involvement they've had in revising the IEPs for this new model. And the reason I'm wondering it is because I'm thinking about Heather's email, and she made some really good points about the scheduling. And Jess has said, well, we're going to make sure we meet IEPs. So I'm wondering if parents just haven't had a chance to meet and talk through this yet, or if I want to know more about special ed. So that's my first question. And my second question, I too am a little bit worried about the burden on the teachers, particularly having been a teacher. I'm just sort of thinking, how would I manage this? And I don't have a clear sense of what the expectations are. And I'm wondering, Wendy, I think this is probably a question for you, how much the teachers, I know we've had small teachers or teachers in smaller committees volunteering, but have the overall student teacher body really reviewed these?
Lauren, do you want me to go first, or would that be all right? Or
Yeah, that'd be fine. I do want to say to everybody, like, what let's try to do now as we near 8 o'clock is let's stick to questions related to the school or schools, and then keep general questions to the end. All right. So just go ahead and answer this question. But after this, let's then finish up with Jesse and Terry, and then move on to Bill and Stephanie, and then move on to the principals of the elementary schools. Right. And then after that, general questions, and then we'll finish up. So go ahead, Jesse.
okay. So special education, as I had indicated previously, is really working to adapt to these different models. In terms of communication with parents and amending IEPs, we really need to know what the models are in the school before we can look at any changes that have to be made to programming. I will say that many IEP service needs can be met under any model. I mean, sometimes we might have to provide services virtually or in person or a mixture of both. But because of the nature of the IEP, we're able to provide appropriate services in a way that doesn't require an amendment. However, there are certain programs for children that will require adjustment, but we can't do that until we know what model we're dealing with. So there's that piece. The other piece I just like, I'm not sure if I have permission. It looks like I do. I want to share with you a document that I created in collaboration with my staff. If you look here, this multiple point of access model, this is posted on our website. Everyone has access to it, and it really details principles, policies, different protocols, and then it really details kind of in general what to expect by program. So like, for example, I'm just going to scroll down here for one at just to show you what I'm talking about. Sorry, the computer is really slow this evening. My connectivity might not be great, but this is a great reference guide for teachers, for administrators, for families, and everyone in between. So we have different levels of service that are available and look different depending on the model that is selected by schools. So I'm continuing to go through here, Chelsea, but I just want you to know that this resource is available to everyone and provides a lot of information. While it's not student specific, it's program specific to give people a sense of what they can expect if we're in person, what they can expect if we're hybrid, what they can expect if we're remote. There are sections in each category for synchronous instructional plans, asynchronous instructional plans, inclusion and what that looks like, scheduling, data collection, provider availability, and ed tech utilization. So I would say, you know, a lot of questions can be answered here with this document, and I would encourage, you know, folks to share and share alike. But beyond that, you know, we're really addressing things on a student by student basis as the plans for the schools are finalized.
Can we link that document that you just showed to the master replanning list? Because I think that would help a lot, because that looks exactly like, that will answer all my questions.
Sure. I think Stephanie can probably include that in the plan directly for sure.
Okay, thank you, thank you, thank you. Any more questions for Jesse and Tara? I see Gerald.
I have a question.
I have a point of clarification and then a comment. So just to make sure that we're all clear, the students on a blue day don't necessarily have the same classes as the students on a white day, as far as the high school goes. So if a student, if a group A student is at school and has a blue day class, they might not have anything to do with the students that are at home from group B. So there's not necessarily a chance for a teacher to be virtually teaching a class for students that are home while they're actually in the school teaching a class for the students that are there in person. And the second comment, this has to do with the previous discussion about students at MCST and about bringing something into the pod. And I really want to make this clear. Perhaps I wasn't as articulate as I should be before, but we have, especially at the high school, we have students that are working, a lot of students that are working, and they're going to be exposed to all kinds of things. We also have students that are playing sports, and as far as I know now, they're going to be playing against teams from other schools. And so if we really are that concerned about anyone bringing something into the schools, then we really need to talk about banning kids from working, banning kids from playing sports against other schools. I mean, this is the logical step to that kind of thinking. That's my comment.
All right, thank you. Carol, you had a question for Jesse and Terry?
I have a question for you, Lauren, about the timing of this meeting. It's already 8 o'clock. Is it realistic to think we will get through the elementary portion tonight? And the staff requirement.
We're gonna have a discussion at 9 p.m. soon we get there as to what to do. So everybody just know yourself, know your stamina, but we're gonna do that. Tom.
Yep. So I just wanted to go back to the capacity of, while we're talking about the high school, the capacity of the building to achieve the requirements from the CDC and the DOE, and we've determined that approximately 520 students is too many, and we've determined that 260 is doable. So somewhere in there, there's a threshold where it tips the scales the other way. And is it possible to think that when you factor in students who are going to MTST and you factor in what is sure to be a certain subset of our population who's going to choose to not send their students to school, that we might reach that number and be able to go full in person? And I guess I would add that I think that, you know, I get the issue, I get the problem, but I think, you know, I'm coming at this from valuing greatly what students get from a teacher every day. And I very much subscribe to the the idea that, I mean, I certainly have heard people say, well, our kids aren't falling behind because everybody else is in the same place. But I think they are falling behind. And I think that it is valuable to spend every day with your teacher. And if there is anything we can do that would make that possible, I think that we need to try to find a way to do it, because, just saying that they're not falling behind by seeing their teacher a couple of times a week doesn't really put a lot of value on what they get from their teacher. I think what they get from their teacher every day is very valuable, and that we need to bend over backwards to do whatever we can to have our students have that at all grade levels. So.
Yeah, I agree, Tom. If we could create the perfect system and we could add on to our building and do all these things, if we could find a way to get everyone there, we absolutely would. But it's just.
So I guess just to bring it to a point, my specific question is there a number at which we could bring everybody back? And is it possible to think that between MCST and people who are going to not send their kids, that we might be able to achieve that?
I don't know how probable it is do we achieve that, and we're still kind of it's a multi-layered jigsaw puzzle at this point to figure out what that is, but that is one of the scenarios that may play out, that we might be able to fold these two pods back together and have everybody in the building at once if all the other pieces fall into place. But we're going to continue to monitor that, and if that's one of the reasons why we designed it the way it is, because it is easy to fold those groups back together and then separate them again if we had to, if the spacing allowed to. But but we'll keep checking. We're going to keep looking, because I agree. The more in person, the better.
Right. So and that's not to take away from the tremendous amount of work that's been put into this. We greatly respect and value all that you're doing. But for me, clearly we want health and safety has to come first, and we want to keep people healthy. But having kids be with their teachers 5 days a week is really, really important. And they are falling behind if we don't achieve that. And that's not okay with me.
Speaking of our job at 30,000 feet, part of our job at some point, start thinking about, with all of you as our admin team, how do we have a reentry plan? How do we do an entry program when things are safe and sound, whenever that is? And how do we assess where kids are at? Because some kids are going to be fine and some kids are really not, so we'll have to cross that bridge when we get closer to it, but that's something for us to keep in mind into the future. Any more questions for Jesse?
I just want to jump in about one thing, Lauren, real quick.
Yes, go ahead.
And this is not just for the high school, but I'm thinking about the high school in particular right now because Jesse's here. But as Amy pointed out, there are a lot of parents that aren't going to want to send their kids to school for whatever reason, K through 12. And we know that we have to present an option for them. I want to make a recommendation to think about, because we may not get through this tonight, but my thought process is that we're obviously going to have some dedicated teachers to do that, particularly probably at the elementary, maybe middle school level. I'm not sure about the high school level. And I know we're trying to do a lot of things with the same teacher to make them do a lot of different things. But one point that I would like to really bring out, if somebody is dedicated to remote learning, I'm thinking that we're going to need some more preparatory time in advance before school opens. So if school's going to open on September 8th, I'm not sure at the high school level, or maybe even the elementary level, we're going to be ready to teach all virtual learning at that point in time. And it has to be an option for students to do that. And so even while I agree 100% with Tom about in-person learning, I think that option, we should think that through as a district. And maybe for those kids that are going to go online only, we delay their start of school and we make up the time in another place. But I don't think we can ask our teachers to be prepared to be able to teach online learning and in-person learning at the same time, especially when we don't know how many students we're going to have to teach online. And that's going to be a serious issue. And Tom's brought that up, as Amy and other people. And I think that's something that we need to seriously consider delaying school for people who want to just go online. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on that, Jesse, or any other principals that are on the call. But I do think that that's important to talk about.
I would love chime in here if I can, and I just want to remind the board, I know you're being cognizant of the time, but certainly all of our next steps are dependent upon whether or not you vote for the plan. So if there is a vote tonight, we have steps laid out that we can begin taking as early as tomorrow in order to start figuring some of these pieces out. As Jesse mentioned, it is a very complex puzzle, and we need more data in order to start making those decisions about how to best use our resources. And I think I already explained that piece to the board, that in our goal to offer a remote option to all students, we need to determine what our resources are and determine exactly the number of students that would be taking advantage of that option. So in order to have time to do that, we need a timely answer to be able to take our next steps.
All right, thank you. I would like to move on to the middle school if we could, please, just because it is almost 8:10. Just for timing purposes, so we are going to talk at 9 p.m. to see where we're at, what we want to do. Our own policies say we have to adjourn by 10 unless the majority vote to continue. I'm not sure that we even think about that, but anyway, that's the plan for now. So Bill and Stephanie, you want to go forward with anything you want to talk to us now about, or presentation, whatever you might have.
Sure. Stephanie's going to actually, not the schedule, Stephanie, if you could put up the OMS hybrid reopening plan.
Wait, I just want to say thank you, Jesse and Terry. Thank you. Didn't thank you before we finished up there. Thank you so much for all your hard work. Thank you.
So thank you, folks, for having giving me the opportunity, giving Stephanie and myself the opportunity, and the other administrators a chance to speak with you tonight about our concerns about the reopening of school. You know, it's been a long slog. It's been 6 months since we've seen kids in our hallways, and the one thing I think that everybody wants is to have kids back in school. So I don't think, you know, I think that's one thing that every principal, every teacher, everyone wants. Looking at OMS, so we spent a number of days this summer walking around our school and thinking about social distancing and thinking about our students and thinking about the health and safety of our students and our staff. And one of the things that we realized is that in spite of the fact that we've had this incredible renovation and we've got a facility that, you know, is pretty sweet. One of the things that we've found is that even in the best of times, sounds like I'm writing a novel, even in the best of times, our school was really tight with numbers of students and staff, 376 students and over 70 staff in our building. We last year, you know, there were times where I would go and observe classrooms, and we have a number of them. I have at least 6 listed here that now we can't even we should, you know, it was tight. The numbers were tight, 15, 18 kids in a room. And, you know, kids were on top of each other, and teachers did a great job in making sure that learning happened. So when we walked around the school this summer, we just found that not only, you know, do we have some tight classrooms, but our hallways are tight as well. And there's a real concern that we have in regard to that. We have approximately 124 to 134 students in each grade level. We have 7 core teachers in each grade level. There's 14 to 21 students in each class, but you know, it's not just 14 to 21 students. Sometimes there are one-to-ones, other adults who are in the classroom as well. And it's just really, really tight. So the rationale for us asking for us going to this schedule, and I know you've all been given this document, and if you haven't, my apologies. But our rationale for this is that we're really struggling with fitting everybody into the building as on a daily basis and making it work and making sure that everybody is healthy and safe. One of the things that we would think about if you agree to this plan is to continue and review and evaluate the effectiveness of our programming. Ironically, one of the things that we found is that in middle school, it's all about kids working together, teachers working together. So a lot of our classrooms are equipped with tables, whether they're trapezoid tables or rectangular tables. And the benefit of that is that we can put them together and move them apart and have kids working. The problem with that is when we're looking at social distancing with trapezoid tables and rectangular tables is to create that space so that kids can be socially distanced. And, you know, one of the things I was thinking, and I talked to a teacher about today was back in the day when I was in junior high, we all had desks and chairs and everybody sat in a desk and a chair and you had 30 desks and chairs in classrooms and that's how it was. But that's not what middle school is about. So that's an issue. So not only is it the space, but it's also the equipment. And one of the things that I have put in for is to have desks, individual student desks delivered to our school through the money that we recently got as a district. So what I'm asking for, what we're asking for is to look at a blue and white day, and we will divide our student body into two, a blue group and a white group, and they will attend on alternate days. And teachers will be instructing in person one half of their students each day. When I did some mock-ups over the past couple of weeks. I've done some mock-ups in classrooms, and given social distancing requirements, we've been able to fit in 8 to 11 students in our classrooms. And the other thing that we did see, you know, in spite of the fact that we have a great cafeteria, you know, we're having issues, of course, you know, now with the no more than 50 students gathering at a time. We're looking at increasing our lunch periods. We are looking at having students, I mean, we're doing quite a few things, and I understand, and I kind of gathered from, you know, hearing the board members talking to Jesse and about the concerns about contact and having kids be in touch, in contact, you know, working with adults and how important it is. And so I don't look at this thing lightly, but I'm really concerned, you know, just about the overall health and safety of our student body and our staff. But we're looking at putting some things into place, even if we go to an alternate day with a blue-white schedule and we divide the student body into two cohorts. We will, you know, have them eating breakfast with their teachers in the morning, doing an advisory, looking at that social emotional piece. Our overall schedule, which Stephanie can go over with you in a minute. When students are in school, we're looking at maximizing our academic time in order to make sure that kids are getting the support that they need. We're looking at counseling groups, establishing that. And one thing that we found when we did the emergency teaching last spring, we were not assessing any work. So what we found is kids were like, why should I do the work if I'm not getting assessed? So one of the things that we would push forward on this is that formative and summative assessments will be assessed. And I think the other piece of that, which it has been an issue for people, is, well, what about the equity? What about kids who don't have internet? What about families who don't have internet? And I think that our technology department has done a good job with making, doing the best they can to make sure that families have that access so that kids can do this stuff. They can do the work at home. They'll have the technology that they need. And if they don't, teachers will provide them with alternative assessments as well. So,
Bill,
yeah.
Just want to quickly say that the whole assessment part is a key difference between last spring and this coming year. You guys have looked at it. There've been articles nationally about it in the state of Maine. I mean, it's just like kids were like, whatever, last spring, understandably. This time, that will really help as you work to engage them in whatever way you possibly can.
Well, and I think it's important. I think it's important because it gives them meaning for work.
Right.
And so one of the things that I heard earlier in the conversation this evening is, what about attendance? So when we have kids, if we have an alternate day, a blue-white day, what happens? What happens? How do we check in with kids? And you'll see down here in a little bit, I talk about that, but we'll be working with the technology integrator in our building and with the technology department to create a check-in system. So when students aren't in school, obviously when they're in school, they get, you're here, click. But when they're not in school, there'll be a way for them to have to check in either through our home, our office, through Becca Barstow and Valerie Stone, or in some way with their teachers to check in to say, I'm here, I'm doing some work, this is what I'm doing. And so we're working on that. Do we have that ready and ready to roll? No, we don't, but that's something that, based on where we go after this evening, we'll definitely push forward with that. I had a good conversation with a grade level team last week, and the teachers at the middle school are extremely dedicated, and they understand the situation that we're in. But they are more than ready to do whatever they need to do to move this forward, to make sure that kids, they come in on the day that they're in school, they work on a project, whether it's whatever it might be. They go home, they work on the assignment, they come back in, and they bring that assignment with them, or they send it in electronically, or however they do that. It was an impassioned conversation that I had with these people. Like, yes, we understand that we have these limitations around space, but we also want to work with kids, and we'll do whatever we need to do. This doesn't mean that they're going to be working in their classroom and working virtually, but and the piece that is a challenge for us is that when kids are home, are they going to be working on the materials? But I think the accountability piece with my staff from that meeting, and I'm sure this would be true with any of my teams, because at the middle school level, of course, we have teams, is that they will hold those children accountable, but they will also support those children to make sure that they get the work and they understand the work.
Could I just interject for a second, please?
Yeah, who is this?
This is Mark, Bill, Mark Lewis. And this probably goes more towards a system-wide question, including OMS, obviously. And Stephanie, I think when we were sending out the various surveys last year during emergency learning, I remember you trying to send out several surveys, trying to find out who had access to the internet. And there seemed to be a big black hole. A lot of people didn't respond. We were trying desperately to reach some families, and some families just simply didn't respond. So have we heard from those families? Do we still have that black hole so we can reach all the kids? And is Spectrum still providing hotspots as I think they were last year?
Yes, I can address that, Mark. So we have hotspots that we have that we received from the Maine Department of Education. We did not receive those until 1 week prior to the end of the school year in May. And we prioritized getting those out to any seniors to ensure that they could get any work completed prior to their graduation. We do still have those hotspots available in our survey that we are prepared to send out as soon as possible. It does include a question about technology and whether or not families have access to technology, to the internet. And we will be working on prioritizing getting those hotspots out to the families that need them.
Okay, thank
Right.
you. Sorry, Bill. Go ahead.
If I could piggyback on what Stephanie said, we also delivered a number of devices to families, and we were actually able to look at one example in particular. We had a student at the middle school and a sibling at South School, and we were able to deliver a device so that both of those children had access. So I think we were mindful in how we delivered that. That capability to families. So yeah, and then the other piece, a big piece for us, and this is not just when students are at home, this is also, the social emotional piece is huge, and I also heard in the earlier conversation with the high school around standards and for us, a bigger piece isn't that, it's more about the social emotional piece with kids and creating, recreating those relationships. And I understand that in your mind as a board member, you're probably sitting there going, well, yeah, but you're telling kids to come every other day. How are you going to do that? And we have a couple ideas in place. One of those is for virtual counseling with kids, with our school counselors, but also when they are in school to look at that. And I think the introduction of an advisory program for this coming year is going to be critical in creating those important relationships with our students. So that's something that we're looking at as well. Question?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Interrupt me anytime.
Bill, can I ask you a question? Doug Curtis?
Yeah, Doug, what's up?
So I like your approach to this whole thing. We had a comment from a parent, which kind of related back to my kids were in elementary school, but sixth grade is 11, 12 years of age, and many parents, of course, have to work and they have daycare issues as well. So they're old enough to take care of themselves, but the concern was, and the accountability piece is huge with all of us. I understand that. And I believe we can only do what we can do. Do you believe 11 or 12-year-old, say sixth grader, left alone at home could accomplish what you want to achieve?
Doug, I can tell you as a parent of two grown children and two children, I can tell you right now that this is what's kept me up at night all summer long. I wake up at 3 o'clock